This video is sponsored by the book summary and discovery app, Blinkist. Use the link in the description and you'll receive 1 free week and 25% off an annual premium membership. Typically, we feel as though we are in the driver's seat. We feel as though we are in control of ourselves, going where we want for reasons that we are aware of. Generally, with proper attention, self-reflection, and effort, we can end up places that are close enough. But if you've ever been in the driver's seat of an actual car, driving along on an otherwise ordinary day, in an otherwise ordinary good mood, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, you had the sudden urge, even if just for a moment, to turn the car into oncoming traffic, or off a bridge or a cliff that you are driving on, then you have likely also had the ominous visceral realization that you are not as aware and in control of the source of your thoughts, feelings, and desires as you like to think. Perhaps you are not at all in the way you like to think. This experience might sound strange to some people, feeling an urge to turn into traffic or drive off a cliff while having no interest in dying or inflicting any harm onto anyone or anything. But the phenomenon is so common, it has multiple names, has been discussed by various philosophers and psychologists, and has been researched in several studies. The phenomenon is most commonly referred to as the call of the void, originally a French phrase, l'appel du vide. More broadly, phenomena of this sort are also often referred to as intrusive thoughts. Perhaps the most common case, however, is specifically known as the high place phenomenon. High place here referring literally to the experience of being in a high-up location, like the top of a building or cliff. Perhaps you have experienced this version yourself. It is typically described as being high up somewhere, often with minimal to no guardrails, and while standing near the edge, the individual suddenly becomes overtaken with anxiety. Not that wind will blow them over, nor that the ledge is unstable and will crumble underneath them, but rather, they become worried that without their consent, the brain might decide to let or convince their body to jump. In a 2011 study conducted at Florida State University by psychologist Dr. Jennifer L. Hames, about 1/3 of 431 participants claimed to have experienced this. Other studies have shown that over 50% of people have experienced at least aspects of this phenomenon. There are, of course, various ways to consider and attempt to explain this phenomenon. Perhaps it is merely the product of our curiosity, the appeal of something extreme that we will never actually do. We watch horror and thriller movies partly for this exact reason, to simulate the experience of extreme and often horrible scenarios in order to satiate our morbid curiosity. Perhaps then, if this is the case, we experience the call of the void phenomenon because our mind is trying to simulate what it might be like if the worst case happened, and we misunderstand this as a desire or urge. We are inherently curious beings. As children, many of us at least consider putting our hands on a stove when we are told that it is hot. We consider putting our fingers in electrical outlets when we are told that they are dangerous. Perhaps then, as adults, we consider jumping off the ledge when we know that it will kill us. What does that one feel like? We might wonder. It's just one step away. Perhaps we are just perversely curious to our own potential harm. Maybe we do in fact partly want to know what it feels like. Maybe part of us wants it in general. Alternatively, referring back to the aforementioned Florida State University study, Hames and her colleagues argued that the phenomenon is a product of a misinterpretation of our survival instinct. In the high place example, the individual experiences a fear of falling off the cliff or building and instinctually reacts by taking the necessary measures to avoid this. This might include things like visualizing and imagining the situation, as well as moving away from and avoiding the edge. The individual's conscious mind then misinterprets and rationalizes this response as having been an urge to jump rather than an urge to avoid the edge. This experience has also been explored substantially within the philosophy of existentialism, though existentialists see it quite differently. Specifically, existentialist philosophers Soren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre both examine and discuss the phenomenon within their work, both using the exact example of someone being on the edge of a building or cliff. In his seminal work, Being and Nothingness, Sartre describes the experience of being in the situation and feeling the anxiety of possibly jumping as a result of one's realization of their individual freedom and responsibility. Sartre referred to it as the vertigo of possibility. In Kierkegaard's work, of which Sartre was greatly influenced, he similarly wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." In every moment, one has the freedom to choose to do anything that is possible, including potentially horrible things, and one is left solely to their own devices to make these decisions, or not. Famously, Sartre wrote, "Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." According to Sartre as well as Kierkegaard, the human being ceaselessly finds himself at the intersection of infinite possibilities, blind uncertainty, and personal responsibility. As a result, human beings are condemned to be free, as it is a burden to bear that inevitably produces intense anguish. Both Sartre and Kierkegaard use this high-place scenario as a way of illustrating this. On the edge of the cliff or building, one experiences the true weight of this responsibility. It is the symbolic height of the anguish associated with the human condition. It is life or death, and it is always one step away, and it is up to us to decide. Building off but countering the existentialist's explanation, one could also argue that this feeling is not a response to the realization of one's freedom, but rather the realization of one's lack of freedom. Typically, in regular conditions, we are self-deluded to believe that we are in control of mostly everything we think and do, but on the edge of the cliff, under extreme circumstances, we realize that perhaps we aren't. Perhaps we are not free to do anything, but rather, we are imprisoned to do only what we are compelled to do by the mysterious and complicated webbing of cause and effect constructed by our circumstances, our genetics, our moods, our unconscious mind, our environment, everything. In this case, the feeling similarly springs up from the combination of possibility and uncertainty, mirroring the existentialist view, but dissimilarly, it is not the uncertainty of what we will do with our freedom, but it is the uncertainty of what we will do because of our lack of freedom or free will. The uncertainty of our impulses and feelings and thoughts that seemingly always just appear in our consciousness, of which we never really know or control until we've already thought, felt, or acted on them. If part of us had the thought of jumping, could part of us act on it as well? Even if we never would, and our conscious filter always catches us, perhaps the call of the void is so unsettling because it is a rare moment of clarity into this, a void in our own psychology. There is relatively little research on the call of the void, and even less certainty around an explanation. Perhaps the void is not merely at the foot of the cliff or the building or whatever else. Perhaps rather, it is in us, an opening or gap between what we know about ourselves and what we don't, what we feel we control about ourselves and what we don't. Regardless of the reason and explanation, once we've heard the call of the void, we must live with the strange echo of a voice that came from us but isn't ours. This video was sponsored by Blinkist. Exploring these sorts of philosophical and perhaps darker topics, like the call of the void, can be extremely fascinating, useful, liberating, poignant, cathartic, and so on. But of course, it's also important that we make sure we spend time and attention on other areas on the surface of our lives, things like our overall health, relationships, career, daily routine, and so on. A great way to do this is with Blinkist, an app that allows you to understand the most important ideas from over 5,500 nonfiction books and podcasts across 27 different categories, all in just 15 minutes. A great book to help you keep your head on straight in this strange existence is Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer, which is extremely useful for understanding the origins of addictive, obsessive, and unwanted thought patterns, and most importantly, how to interrupt and untangle these patterns to retrain our mind and move away from unnecessary anxiety. Blinkist provides a great breakdown of this title, which, like all titles on their platform, can be both read or listened to, even while offline, making it easy to discover and learn new insights whenever and wherever you are. And now, through Blinkist Connect, premium users can also share their account with one other person at no additional cost, allowing you to share your favorite selected books with someone close. Discover new books and new authors, refresh yourself on important books you've already read, and accelerate your understanding of new complex ideas wherever and whenever. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1, a 7-day free trial, and 25% off Blinkist Premium. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.